Okay, cool. All right, so I only have a couple questions, unless I'm just not smart enough to figure out where they are. Let me
I
see.
sent at least two today,
Yeah, I think I saw two.
but don't say which ones they are.
Okay, well, they're not from you.
Anonymous.
Anonymous. Hold on. I have I had this dumping into a document, but now I'm just trying to find that document. Make copy. How are we doing this? There we go. Uh, Give me one sec. Let me try to find this thing. If you have another question, guys, you can put it in the chat, and I'll get to it, so that you don't have to like shout it out right now. So if you're thinking of something, just throw it in the chat thing on the side, and then I'll get there as well. Nope.
I like your shirt, Becca.
Becca, are your bangs getting really long? Are your bangs getting really long?
Oh, I was saying you're on mute, Becca. But then when I said you're on mute, Becca, I was on mute.
Yes, Bianca, yes.
Okay. 3:31. Okay, so that was last time. I thought so. Okay, so questions I got. I think the first one's great. So the first one I got, hey Mads. First one I got was, and Jordan, not on the same phone. You're on mute, Madison.
Quarantine's got them. They're not speaking.
Oh man, they're on different sides of the house. So I got, first question is, I'm scared I'm losing all of my good heavy lifting muscles. Can I do more volume with lighter weights to keep those muscles intact? Say like 100 squats with 35 pounds, or is that definitely not equal? It is not equal. I don't want to sugarcoat things, right? Like they're in a one-for-one sort of comparison, a 35-pound barbell is not going to emulate heavy barbell training, but that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of things that you can do to make training with a dumbbell or something like that more challenging, and in ways that can carry over to that strength when you get back under a barbell, right? So it just means we have to be a little more creative about what we do. The first thing that I would look at is volume, and the person who asked this mentioned that, right? They said, should I do 100 squats? I don't know about a set of 100, but maybe, you can do something like what we're doing in the sort of strength progression that we're doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday right now, where instead of building in weight, you build volume. So maybe you do, 10 squats, then 15 squats, then 20, over a couple weeks or something like that, and sort of build your way up there is one way to do it, versus like running a weight linear progression, which people are more comfortable with or more used to, what we normally do with barbell training. Does that make sense? So that's one way to do it. After about, I would say 20 reps is the sort of like high watermark, right? So when you train your muscles, there's kind of three ranges that you train. The first range is pure strength, and that's usually achieved in rep ranges from like one, I would actually say like 2, 3 to like 5, 6 reps, right? That is a pure strength range with a little bit of hypertrophic carryover, with a little bit of muscle building as well. Hey, Steve. from like 6 reps or so to about 12 reps or so, maybe 15. That's what we call hypertrophy, which is just muscle size, right? Cross-sectional density and size of muscle. That's usually where bodybuilders train. And then anything like 15 reps higher, certainly 20 reps higher, is muscular endurance, right? Is just, can your muscle keep sort of repeating things over and over and over again. So if you're training to get strong, I would say trying to stay, 15 reps and under is the goal. So if you're doing volume, I would try to kind of cap it 15, maybe 20 reps tops. Other things you can play around with to make things more challenging. You can do unilateral work, I would say, is my first go-to, right? If it's easy on 2 legs, it will probably be harder on 1 leg. So that might mean, instead of doing a, single legged squat, we're doing lunges, or we're doing a Cossack squat, which we've been doing in the strength stuff we've been doing, or even like weighted pistol variants. You could try. You can play. The other benefit of unilateral stuff is that it helps make sure that your strength is balanced, right? I program it even when we have access to a barbell to make sure that people are staying sort of healthy and balanced. But now is a good time to sort of double down on that if you can. Other things we can play around with is tempo, right? So we can do slower negatives. We can do holds at the bottom, right? Especially if we know that we've got sort of sticky points in our squat, right? This could be a good time to sort of work on some of the diagnostic work in those positions and kind of spend some time there and get comfortable there. That's perfect to do with lighter weight. And if you do that, when you get back under a bar, it will make things easier. Maybe not day one when you're back under the bar, but eventually. You can play around with range of motion, right? So you can maybe play around with squatting a little deeper, or doing things like, anybody ever done 1 1/4 squats? No? That might be in the next, we might do that in the next strength block. That is a squat where you go all the way down, you come 1/4 of the way up, you go all the way down again, and then you come all the way up. They're pretty brutal. So anything like that, I would add in. You can play, you get creative about if you've got a band along with your squat, right? Maybe you have the band, or a band along with your dumbbell rather. Maybe you use the band and the dumbbell together to create some resistance. So, creativity is key. I wouldn't just kind of grab a dumbbell and just squat with it forever. So try to figure out a way to sort of like, in one way or the other, bring that rep range down into something that's a little more challenging. That makes sense? Questions on that, or things related to like, how can I, with one piece of equipment, do the things that I've been doing? Okay, cool. Let's see. There's another one. I think that might be the other one. All right. The next one I see is, what movements can I do to get really toned arms? The first thing that I would say is that, toned is more, the idea of toned is going to be more a function of nutrition than anything else. So if you can create change in your nutrition, you'll probably see when people say toned, what they mean is like, from most of the time, sort of like a relationship between intracellular, or between body fat and muscle mass. So most of the time, less body fat or more muscle mass will make whatever it is more toned. Muscles can only do 2 things, right? We already talked about hypertrophy, which is muscle growth. The opposite of that is atrophy, which is muscle loss. That's it, right? Muscles get bigger and they get smaller. They can't get longer They can't get leaner. They can't get, toned usually means more muscle. So that to get that kind of effect, what you can do is you could focus on that thing, and that's a perfect thing to do while you have, limited equipment. I joke sometimes that like when I started CrossFit, I had been like a bodybuilding gym bro for some time, and done like a million curls and a million bench presses. And when I started CrossFit, I was like, cool, I guess I'll never do curls again. Like, we don't have to do curls. We do, pull-ups, we do this, we do that. And then like eventually you come kind of full circle where you realize that, maybe some curls will help your muscle ups, will help something else, or might just help you, if you're like, hey, I want this specific thing, right? I want my arms to be more toned, will help in that way. So you can do things that specifically target that, whether that's curls, whether that's tricep work, whatever that is, that will help. And that's stuff that you can do usually with lighter weights, with bands, stuff like that. Does that sufficiently answer that? There isn't like a secret exercise that tones arms or any other part of your body.
There's one for butt, right?
What?
There's like a butt one. I see it on YouTube all the time.
Oh yeah. Butt blasting.
Butt blasting.
Yeah.
Careful when you search for that, though.
Make sure Google safe search.
Wait, do you guys remember the shake weight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one.
That was good. Those are actually I don't see any other questions. I see those two. So
Hey, no, back to that first question.
Yeah.
How often do you say when you do that unilateral training or whatever a week?
I don't think, I think with most of it, you probably, it would be hard to overtrain it unless you're just doing tons and tons of volume. I think, 1 would be fine. I think 2 would probably be pretty good too. I think you could do it 3 days a week. I think it would probably be more boring than anything else, but I think you could do it 3 days a week. I'd say I've really gotten into twice a week training for stuff, things I'm focusing on as a sweet spot. I did a long time of like powerlifting and things like that, where like 3 days or 4 days of training your lifts, or if you do Olympic lifting training, usually it's like 5 or 6 days is standard. And I found that now like 2 days I really like. It's enough frequency for me to feel like I'm getting some neuromuscular adaptation, where like things are feeling easier just because I feel like it's more practiced. But it's not so often that like I start getting really bored and I'm like, oh God, here I am squatting again or doing Bulgarian split squats or whatever it is. So if there's something that, say, even if it's something that we've been doing in our programming, like the Bulgarian split squats or something, and you're like, wow, these are really challenging for me, you could throw in a second day a week as a sort of like interstitial day, where maybe you try to get 1 more rep as opposed to 2 more reps, and make that, basically what you're doing is you're making the linear progression jump a little smoother, right? Instead of going 10, 12, once a week, you're going 10, 11 midweek, 12 the next week, right? And you're just getting a little more volume and a little more sort of practice. It's a good question. But with most strength, a lot of strength training stuff, as long as you're not in a single session overdosing volume, like doing, 50 plus reps of something heavy, there are people who squatted every day for a year, heavy with a barbell. You can do that. You can't really do anything else if you're doing that, but you could do that. Cool. Other questions? Anything that's come up this week? Anything that come up after the nutrition seminar?
Hey, Noah, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Kate.
Hey.
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 Hey. to kind of maybe it might kind of piggyback off of what you just answered a little bit, but I feel like in CrossFit, there's so many different movements that require like you having like working on that skill to get that movement, like handstand push-ups or handstand walks or rope climbs or toes to bar. And I feel like a lot of times it's hard to know like what to focus on and when to how to work on all of those different movements. You know what I mean? Like there's just so many different things in CrossFit that you can try and master. So, and I know a lot of times like it's hard to work that into the regularly scheduled programming at a gym because you're trying to cater to like all of the members who can or can't do some of those movements. And so like how do we work on mastering some of those skills like muscle ups and stuff, either like, you know, outside the gym or on our own or something like that? I don't know. This I'm just kind of rambling now, but does that make sense? Like,
That definitely makes sense. I mean, I think that's a very commonly asked question, and I definitely have thoughts on that. The first thing to point out is I'm going to share my screen real quick. So this is the like, let's see, can I zoom in? Yeah, there we go. That is what's called the like theoretical program design model or something of CrossFit, right? The base is nutrition. The next thing is Metcon, gymnastics, weightlifting and throwing, and sport, right? This is from like original CrossFit way back when, way back in the early days. And, you know, it was basically a sort of like a guide for people, especially early CrossFit, which was people working out on their own a lot, as to like where to put their energy, right? And I actually wrote an article about this. I'll put a link in the chat for Beyond the Whiteboard about how very often that pyramid gets inverted in CrossFit, and people start with sport. And sport was originally supposed to mean like sport, like you're a professional baseball player or something like that. And the very tip of that, after you get all these other things, is you training for your sport. But what I think it's come to mean a lot is that people get, you know, keyed up into the sport of CrossFit. I want to learn how to do not just pull-ups, but butterfly pull-ups, you know, not just muscle-ups, but kipping muscle-ups linked together, you know, tricks to make my double under transitions faster, or to, you know, cut down on time in my toes to bar or something. And I think that's important. And I would never say don't practice that, but I do think it's worth keeping in mind that that is the sport of CrossFit, and is not necessarily fitness. After that, I think a lot of time people spend a lot of time with like weightlifting, especially if you watch like Instagram a lot. There's probably, I would say, like a 3-to-1 people posting like the biggest lifts they've ever made to anything else, right? And then gymnastic skill. And I mean, you know, nobody would post a 45-minute Metcon on Instagram. So you never see that. But so I would say that's the first thing I like to kind of think about. And then as far as skill development goes, I mentioned it before when we were talking about how many days to practice something, right? Your body develops in sort of, in a broad sense of thought, two different ways. So neurologically and muscularly, and then there's overlap between them, which is neuromuscular, right? So sometimes we get better at things because we get stronger, right? And that can be stronger in a bunch of different ways, whether that's being able to move more weight, hold a position, maintain rigidity through my midline while I'm supporting weight, something like that. All those I would consider stronger. I would consider that muscular strength. But then there's also a lot, and especially in CrossFit, where some things are like fairly high skill, there's a lot of neurological stuff, right? I think double unders are probably the easiest example there, right? Where double unders are not really about how strong you are. There's some, you know, base requirements of strength, but I wouldn't say that's overarching. they are, timing and technique and kind of linking all that together. And then there are a lot of things in CrossFit that bridge the gap between them. So Olympic weightlifting, high skill gymnastics, especially like under fatigue, kipping linked together, are pretty neuromuscular where we need a little bit of both, right? I would say the first thing I would always say is train the strength first, right? You need to be strong enough to be in those positions. And I would say the basics of the strength are usually the most important. So training both strict variations of movements, but also the sort of like things that make up that movement, right? So if I want to do a muscle up, my first thing I would have people do before they start messing around on the rings and things like that, like if you can do 10 strict pull-ups and 10 strict ring dips, you can do a muscle up, right? I can teach you how to do a muscle up in 30 minutes, guaranteed, right? So it's sort of like a question of that, right? And when I say strict, I mean like strict full range of motion, kind of clean hold in position, things like that. So I would always say train the strength first, and train the basics of the strength first, and then especially for neurological development on things like gymnastics and stuff like that, is my big thing is practicing in little bites and practicing one thing at a time. So very often it's a kind of process of delayed gratification where the last thing you want to do is actually try the skill you're trying to learn. What you want to do is get lots of really good practice training like little bits of like half to 1/4 of the skill at a time. So if we talk about toes to bar, whether that's a kipping swing and strict toes to bar together, or leg raises with a really good rhythm, or in a muscle up, whether that's strict ring pull-ups or ring chin-ups with a 10-second hold at the top, transition drills on the floor, and dips. So it's sort of like breaking things to their constituent parts. Katie, I don't know if I answered kind of like the larger question of like what should you prioritize, like are rope climbs more important than this or that? Is that what you meant?
No, I think like, not like really to prioritize, but just like how to master all of them when there's like so many different things. But I think like you kind of touched on just like pick one thing to work on at a time and, start with like building the strength for that first. So yeah, I think you answered it mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing at a time is a good way to do it. I think it's really common to be like, all right, I want to get better at my handstand push-ups and this and that, and like put it all together, and then none of it happens. I've become, as I've done this for longer and like kind of gone around with it, I've become more and more a fan of like making things really bite-sized and really like easy and palatable. I'm a big fan of like 10-minute EMOM couplets of two things, so like 10-minute EMOM, 5 strict toes to bar, and then on the other side, like, either it can be something that's the same thing. So it's like maybe 5 strict toes to bar on the even minutes and like 10 just kipping leg raises on the odd minutes, right? Or if that feels like it's going to be really fatiguing because it's just banging on the same thing, maybe I do, 5 strict toes to bar and I do, a 30-second handstand hold or something like that. And that's a nice way. I mean, that's 5 sets basically in 10 minutes, in and out. You can do it like, when you get to the gym. I've been doing stuff here where like, I have a workout I'll do in the evening, but maybe in the morning I just do like a 10-minute EMOM of like some gymnastic work or something like that just to play around with it. So I think making it something that that feels like pretty palatable and pretty easy to get into is important as well. But yeah, I would say, one thing at a time. And then, especially when we're back in the gym, trust that the like larger program is gonna, take care of, giving you touches of everything, so like your body doesn't forget it. Cool.
Yeah. I wonder if and this is totally okay if you shoot this down immediately, but for open gym on Fridays when we get back to the gym, obviously, I don't know if you and the coaches could maybe help program some kind of skills work to just do on our own, being if you want to work on toast bar and you just said handstand push-ups, here's a little couplet that you can do, or something like that, whether it's every Friday or once a month, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'll talk to the coaches about it. I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think one of the challenges with that is that a lot of that skill stuff, people get hung up in different spots, So I know for me, doing muscle ups, the hardest thing for me is my backswing is challenging. That's the hardest thing for me. That's not common. For most people, it's transitioning. The transition for me is easy. So I could do transition drills till the cows come home and I probably won't get that much better at it. I need to spend time in my backswing, and really for me that's a mobility thing than more than anything else. Whereas I know Kyle's on this call. I know Kyle spent a lot of time working on hey buddy, has spent a lot of time working on his transition in a muscle up, but his backswing is pretty good, So it's a lot of this stuff, especially when you get into the higher skill stuff that has lots of constituent parts, can be something that requires a little bit of having somebody watch you or something like that, and then get with you about what to do. What I would say is that lean on your open gym coaches, and you can always grab them and say hey, I'm having trouble with this, can you take a look? And they'll watch you and give you some feedback, and then be do you know what's something I could do, or what's a 2-day a week program that you think would be beneficial to help me with that. I think that will give you something that's more sort of tailored to you than something we can do midline after party, because everybody can always do more ab work. But with a lot of this other stuff, one person's easy spot might be somebody else's sticky spot. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Andres, I see you.
I got a whoop. Can I join your team?
I don't know if my team's active anymore.
Are you still wearing? Does anyone else have a whoop?
No.
Sorry, buddy. No whoop.
I can refer you. You get a free month.
Oh yeah.
All right. That was my question.
Sorry. I mean, I can look it up. You're on my team. I'm just.
We're always on the same team, brother.
Spiritually.
Sorry, I totally lost connection there towards the end. I feel like I missed the really juicy part of your answer too.
Katie, what I said was just what's easy for one person with a lot of the higher skill stuff might be what's hard for somebody else. So I would say we can play around. I'll talk to the coaches about something like that. But what I would say is that a lot of times I think it might be more beneficial for you to grab the coach at Open Gym and have them watch you, and kind of give you a little feedback on what they see, and then have and say, hey, can you give me some guidance on how would I go about practicing this, once or twice a week or 3 times a week, or how often you want to do it. Worst comes to worst, you could always take a video and send it to me, and I'll do the same thing. But I think there are some things that we can do that everybody can get benefit from, right? Everybody needs to squat, everybody needs to condition, everybody, we can do after party midline stuff, because everybody can always use more of that. But especially things that are related to neurological development, mobility, I would say especially is probably number one, where people are going to be widely different, and what's really good for person A might not be good at all, or maybe even sometimes bad for person B.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problemo. All right. Any other questions? Anybody done anything creative this week with their limited equipment? No? No creativity. Hey, there's Kyle. You were just a voice for a long time, but now you're a picture too.
Yeah, I was eating, so I had myself muted and blocked out.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. I don't know if I've done anything creative. Worked out in the rain yesterday.
Okay. I
Right
like
before
that.
they closed down all the Austin tracks, I had gone to a middle school. I used to have some soccer fields and stuff. So I was out there and then got rained on in the middle of it. Just kept going.
Wait, what's the word on
It's fun.
track? Are they part of the park closings? Like
No,
school?
it's different. Austin ISD has closed all of their just all of their fields and tracks and everything like that.
Really?
So if it's school related, it's closed for the foreseeable future.
So does that
Wait,
mean
that-
we can't go to the
Yeah.
tracks anymore?
Yeah.
That's a
Oh
bummer.
shit.
I saw Linder was open today, so the elementary school over here by Lumos.
Yeah.
They have a track. They have a track, right? You said.
Yeah, but it's tiny.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
like a 200, 300 maybe, but
They don't run 800s in elementary school yet.
Huh.
so
So I'm just curious, like, what happens if you jump on the track?
I mean,
You get yelled at and they tell you to leave.
Yelled
I
at?
think it's
I think
probably
you
what
get,
it is
I
right
think
now.
you can get ticketed.
Can I get ticketed? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Rio said a cop told him to get lost when he tried to walk his dog at Barton Springs today. And
Okay.
yeah, I think you can get ticketed.
And I don't know if it's just like an Easter weekend thing, but like on Beyond the Whiteboard, I saw MK said she got kicked off of the Austin High School track today. Cops kicked
Oh,
her off.
really?
I don't know. I don't know if it's just gonna be like a weekend thing or if they're gonna keep that strict policy going forward. I know when I went there once last week, the cops were working out at Austin High. So I don't know what's going
It
on.
was MK and I were doing the workout like
Oh, okay.
together, and I looked it up afterwards because the cop didn't give us such information. And the article said, I posted it in the general.
Yeah, I
Slack
saw that. I
thing.
guess I was
But
just
it's
trying to
basically
understand
like
what that meant.
closed for an indeterminate amount of time going forward.
Interesting.
Noah, do you think without eating weights, overall
yeah, I
calorie
heard on the
intake should
grapevine
be
that we're not
lower?
going back.
Oh, sorry.
Wait. That was
Sorry, Bianca.
Kyle, was that it?
Oh no, it's okay.
Okay. Kyle, that was a question? That sounded like a
I had
question.
a question.
Okay.
It was. So, not lifting as heavy weights,
Right.
that seems more cardio focused. Do you think that warrants like scaling back total calorie intake a bit?
It depends on like what you're going for. I mean, I do think most people, I mean, we can take like a 6-person survey here, but I would guess that most people are probably eating slightly less than they used to. Yeah. You know, you're not like eating out. You're not like kind of like, I mean, unless you're really grazing at home, I feel like we're kind of past that. Like Hillary cooked and I ate every baked good known to man in the first week. But since then it's quieted down a little bit. You know, usually when you do like a BMR or what's called a TDEE, who did the nutrition thing on Wednesday, right? So you guys are in the know now about what those mean, right? So your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure, you know, takes into account what you do during the day, both your exercise but also your lifestyle, right? So I would say that for most people, it's going to probably knock them, you know, being at home more, maybe working out slightly less. You know, it's going to knock that down a little bit. If you are, I think you could play around with trying to, you know, with adjusting your calculations based on that. I would be, I think for a lot of people, what's going to happen, especially from a protein intake standpoint, is that that's going to go way low, and that they'll probably, I would say for most people, my worry would be more about muscular atrophy than weight gain, because they're not eating enough, and they're certainly not eating enough protein, and that will lead to both loss of muscle, and then because of muscle's role in total BMR, kind of mess with the BMR number. So I would try to hold protein levels as close to what you were doing before as possible, and then if you want to, I think a lot of times macro science, so to speak, is thought of as like an exact science, and it's really not. So, if you feel like, hey, I feel like, or I've been like weighing myself every couple of days or something like that, and I feel like it's trending upwards, just knock like 100 calories off, a day, and kind of see where it goes. And then if that's, if it's working, hold that. And if it's not, knock another 100 off. I don't think it needs to be that much more scientific than that. And then try to hold your protein at the same number, and then just adjust the other macros to the new thing.
That's good. I'll have to play around with that a little bit. I have been leaning out. Just want to make sure I don't lean out.
Yeah, I mean,
That's my goal before we stopped.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought for you. Like, when you said that, was that if anything, I'd be worried about like, muscle stuff more than weight gain stuff. So I think that's going to be a big, but at the same time, look, this is going to end and people get back in the gym and they'll get strong again. So it's all temporary.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, I hereby declare this Friday FAQ.
No, that's fun. Nice to see people.
Yeah, it's good to see everyone. I think we're gonna try to have all the coaches kind of take one of these. So if you, especially if you have a question that you want one of the coaches specifically to answer, they're all gonna to jump on. So maybe you want to hang on to one in your back pocket if you've got one that's pointed at someone. But yeah,
I'm too embarrassed to ask you that. I'm only gonna ask Robin.
What? Oh, yeah.
I'm too embarrassed to ask, so I'll ask Robin.
Well, that's why we're videotaping them, though.
Yeah, good.
So I can review them later. All right, guys. Have a great Friday night. And fun workout tomorrow. Fun one.
Bye, guys.
See you then.
Nice seeing y'all.
Thanks, Noah.
No problem. Later, dudes.